to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me are two ninjas who secretly hope that they're not actually non-jas. It's John Levingood and Adam Clement.
That's the philosophical kind of, battle we have in our heads our whole lives, isn't it? It's like, am I the ninja or the non-ja? Am I important or am I the red shirt?
Or the American or the Americant.
Or the human or dancer, as some people would say. But yeah, I have a question, guys. You went to ninja school, right? You both went at the same time. You kind of went in 2008. You got out,
Nardwar over here.
Yeah, you got out in 2015. You did 7 years. You guys both got your doctorates in ninja. You had some very successful missions. You had some assassinations. You clearly exhibited all of the ninja workings. And I would love to see you guys be ninjas because, Adam, I think you could because you love Spider-Man. I think you could slink and dive and do all that. John, though, is about 6'2" and 250. So I'd love to see John be 280. I'd love to see him be a Chris Farley-esque Beverly Hills Ninja type guy. But
I like to think of myself as a plus-size ninja.
There it is.
That's very inspiring.
And so you guys are, you're great. You've been fighting, since 2015, 5 years of successful missions. But then you come across Racer X and just a former judo champion and just an entire family who attacks you on a mission and you lose. Does that make you non-jas or does that make you ninjas who lost to a greater foe?
I feel like we were like the kids in Varsity Blues who went out to a strip club and got really drunk and then showed up for like an important all-state game the next day, hungover.
Interesting.
I feel like we had to be hungover for this to have gone so horribly awry, where some dude wearing a handkerchief that he put on in the shadows in the middle of my opening fight sequence caught my punch.
Yeah, if we're being fair, we're talking about a family versus, what was it, one non-ja?
Yep.
So not only do you have Pops Racer, who grossly overpowered, and Racer X, I mean, you're tilting the scales pretty heavily against us.
Okay. The problem is that ninjas are specifically trained for infiltration, surprise, and probably one-on-one or outnumbering their opponents if they're going to be combating them all at once. Whereas in this case, the non-ja was outnumbered. I don't think ninjas get any proper training against flanking.
Raptors
unless
would
you're
kill
like
him.
Bruce Wayne, maybe. He's not a non-ja.
Well, do you think Batman worries about his 6?
Oh, absolutely.
I think Batman worries about his 6, his 6'15", his 6'30", his 6'45", his 7. Do you remember how Christian Bale was moving in the dark? What was it? Batman Begins, when they were talking about the KC fighting style.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, good Lord, the way that man moved. His head was going in every direction like a gun kata.
Yeah, Bruce Wayne confirmed as non-ja.
Could Michael Keaton only look at his 3 and 9 then?
Oh, that's not fair.
Why?
Because the suit was, in my opinion, the best to date, but obviously had its limitations. If you're going to make a dope-ass gothic cowl, yeah, I know, it's going to come with some sacrifices.
He should have put like a rear view. Could he put a rear view on there?
I'm trying to imagine the Keaton cowl with like rear view mirrors.
Because there's no 6. It's just 3 and 9.
There's not a lot.
I don't think he even has a 3. I mean, he needs to like turn his whole torso.
Yeah, the Keaton turn.
Even Christian, even Balebat.
Oh, I love it.
Even Balebat had extremely limited head turning.
True.
That was part of what made so much sense for the Casey fighting style they adopted for that movie.
All right, so who wins? Racer X versus Batman, and Batman versus the Speed Racer family?
Oh, this is really hard. Wait, it depends on which Batman.
Well, you said if you mess with Keaton, you get a beating. So I think Hooflack would kill all of them.
Wait, we're calling him Hooflack?
Yeah. Like, remember
it was just Batfleck.
No, remember from Mango when he's like, Hooflack? And so I've been calling it. I actually really like Ben Affleck's Batman. I don't know why I said Hooflack, but Batfleck would just, I feel like he would grown man the whole group. Keaton just can't move. He gets spun around by a pop, and you call him not man.
I am the Keaton stan, and I will concede this is true.
Would Keaton, though, he was all about his toys.
Yes.
He would use his wonderful toys. He would shoot a little like bat zip line around Daddy Racer's, Pops Racer's legs, and he would trip him. You know what I mean?
He would kill the family.
He might.
And each toy would be some like grossly oversized instrument that came out of like his bat utility belt, which is just makes no sense. But you're right. He has like these ginormous arm apparatuses that just kind of come out of nowhere, especially the zip line.
Now you're going like Joker Looney Tunes with a giant mallet.
Yeah, it is very like old school Warner Brothers in that way, very Looney Tunes.
Clooney would have no chance. Val Kilmer would get cramps because he got drive-through. I think Affleck, ninjas can't fight ninjas because they just, what if they both threw down disappearing smoke at the same time? Like, what do? Do they run into each other?
Wait.
I think that our League of Shadows ninja, though, would wipe the floor with most ninjas, regardless of the elaborate training the ninjas may have had, because the League of Shadows ninjas, I'm going with, Christian Bale canon, if you will, but they train on being the lone target. They train occasionally multiple against one. So I think that our Batman ninjas are the superiorly trained ninjas for this particular case.
Correct. But we also don't know the training of Racer X. We know Pops is like sumo versus with like a mix of other things. I'm not quite sure.
He can turn a man into a ceiling fan by spinning.
Yeah, he's a licensed technician and sumo wrestler. But we also don't know Racer X's pedigree.
Racer X catches 89 punches a day before breakfast. That's his training.
Everything pops out. The toes
his whole
pops
hand
out.
is a callus. So that the slap of the punch doesn't hurt.
Everything in his house just pops out at him. I love that idea, John. Just fists. Yeah. If the Joker fired that boxing glove at him, which Mark Hamill's Joker did in the comic, he would just catch it.
You just catch it.
I'm gonna tell you guys, if I'm the boss, I'm like the henchman boss, I'm the ninja boss, and you guys lose to Racer X, I'm like, with their name like Racer X, I get it. But I would need visual evidence if I saw that you lost to, the Racer family.
Unfortunately, the visual evidence would show you losing to a dude in his boxer shorts wearing a handkerchief around his face.
That's right.
That's a good point.
He doesn't even have his $700 Revo sunglasses on at this point.
So I put on, you guys know that Dido song that plays in Love Actually when the guy is found out by Keira Knightley and he walks around doing all his thinking?
I just love that you know this from Dido, but yes, I know the song.
And so he's just walking around thinking, really, that was me kind of pondering the Non-jas ninja. And I kind of thought to myself, the professional boxers who lost to Tyson, they were still professional boxers. They just weren't Tyson. So by calling him a Non-jas, I think that after an entire family attacks him, like what were ninjas beforehand? And is that a prequel?
I don't know how to respond to that. I think I've just gone cross-eyed.
Yeah, you literally stumped me on that one. That one's got a lot of layers.
I couldn't even think of how to respond.
Do you know that scene in Tommy Boy where Tommy Boy's like, "Oh my god"? That's the reaction. I saw smoke coming out from Adam's Skype monitor. Like he just short-circuited there. It was great.
The fembots just started smoking.
Yes.
Well, all jokes aside, I love Speed Racer. And since this is our second recording of this podcast, because we had one, and that one went the way of the Non-jas, and so now we're back to talk about this film again, I watched it again. So I think I've watched it about 4 times in the last 2 months. And I like it more and more every time. The eye-popping visuals become less kind of... When you watch this movie for the first time, and I'm sure Adam and John, you had this, they're very, that's all you notice at first, but it takes you a while to kind of settle in. So now I'm in that settling in phase with Speed Racer, and I love it. I don't know if you guys had the same reaction watching it again for this.
It's interesting. So I had said in our sadly lost recording, but hey, it brought us together again, so that's cool. But I had said the first time that this is one of those movies that I'm thrilled that someone made, but that I absolutely never want to see again. And because this movie just wasn't for me. It's not that I think it's bad. It's that I can tell it's not for me. And so then after saying on our lost recording that I'd never watch it again, I watched it again for our second recording. So now though, the scenes that I thought that visually this was almost oppressive to watch the first time. The contrast of the live action people on this background that didn't even try to make them blend in, right? It was almost like you just popped them into video game land or Roger Rabbit land. And at first, again, I found it oppressive. The second viewing, it's like I was acclimated, and it's almost like tasting a strong beer. At first, all you taste are the hops, but once you get into it a little bit, you can start to notice its nuance. So this second viewing, I didn't find the things that kind of not annoyed me, but were distracting to me. They didn't distract me. And then the scenes that I was neutral on the first viewing, I actually started to like. Like some of the interpersonal characters, the father-son heart-to-heart, the interactions with Speed Racer and Racer X about who he really is, the end revelation about that. I can finally say I truly enjoyed some scenes. But the scenes that bothered me specifically the first time, because this movie just wasn't for me, bothered me even more the second time.
Really?
So it was an interesting roller coaster for me. Adam, what about you? How did this change at all for you? You were more a fan like Mark. Sure.
Well, I was going to say, as far as second viewings, this is about as glowing a turnaround as I'd expect from you, John. So it's nice to hear. I'm glad you found something to sort of enjoy. But yeah, I mean, as I noted in the last pod, I think this is one of my sort of cornerstone cult favorites, and that's what it is. I mean, it's developed a cult following in sort of the textbook definition way, right? You've got a very small faction of fans who just sing its praises, and people sort of kind of wonder what is there to this movie that I'm missing. But I actually did not watch it again. I was derelict in my homework, like you both. But I own it, and I revisit it every year or two. But I can't imagine that would change much for me in the time since we've discussed it last. I think it's classic Wachowskis. And I think especially for the reasons that you mentioned before, John, this sort of jarring contrast of live action and let's be real, like real talent in the acting against this backdrop of a very decidedly fake environment. It is a lot to take in. It is a sensory overload, but I think that's precisely what the movie was going for. And there's a lot to like about that.
One thing I definitely recommend for anybody who has watched it, and even if you don't really like it, go ahead and check out the behind the scenes videos of this film. They kind of show just how green screen everything was, but I like the VFX breakdowns. I like how detailed the cars are, even though you never really notice the cars in this movie aside from the Mach 5. But yeah, I mean, even if you kind of feel like the visuals are oppressive, and they are, and you haven't acclimated to them yet, I do think just to see how they made it, and just the way that they talk about James Cameron not making movies until the technology's there. I think the Wachowskis, they just said, well, we don't know, like, we're going to make it there. They didn't wait. They went, and I think they helped push the boundaries, and I think green screen acting was helped with this. I think kind of the techniques that they developed previs on set so they could see all the kind of racers in the areas they were at. And now when you're on the set, you see that. I guess if anything, if you're not a fan of it, I guess maybe appreciate it in a way that, the way it maybe kickstarted certain types of filmmaking. That's kind of another thing I love about it.
Well, it does make room for those sort of tender moments. I think John mentioned, there's a lot of exchanges between Racer X and Speed. And for me personally, I really enjoy the Susan Sarandon, like who also taking a step back here for a second. Speed Racer, the movie with Susan Sarandon, like that's a pretty good get. And I think the cast they do such a great job considering that, very little of what's around them on set or on location is fake. But, you mentioned the color and the technology, but I also want to talk really quick just about the editing, because I think that goes overlooked sometimes, especially when you haven't seen it and you're sort of overwhelmed at the ooh and ah of the graphics. But, that vocabulary that they sort of establish is so exhilarating. And I know it can be overwhelming, but it really does kind of, I think, become a character sort of all its own. And when I talk about this, I mean, right, the talking heads and the transitions and the cuts and the wipes that are sort of used, because that's, faintly reminiscent of how the anime played out, is very kinetic. And I think in that respect, I mean, I don't know how long this movie is. Do you guys remember?
2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, for something for that long, which for a family movie, it is a little long. In my opinion, it doesn't feel like anything really outstays its welcome with that sort of editing guiding you along. And I also think it's just without it, it really, I don't know, it wouldn't be remotely the same viewing experience.
I agree.